Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The next topic for today is weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. I will give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Mr. Hook, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today I'm speaking to you from Luhansk city. Last week, unlike many others before, we witnessed a volatile security situation in eastern Ukraine. The daily differentiation in the number of ceasefire violations was vast, in particular in the Luhansk region. On Monday, for example, we recorded 0 ceasefire violations throughout the Luhansk region. Ceasefire violation was vast, in particular in the Luhansk region. By Wednesday, however, our monitoring officers, in particular those in the western parts of the region, were witness to an upsurge of violence. On Wednesday, 7th February, they recorded in Luhansk region more than 3,000 ceasefire violations. In accordance with the Minsk Agreement. Wednesday was in fact the worst day we have seen since March 2017 in terms of the use of such weapons. Throughout the week, we established that such weapons were applied at least since March 2000, including at least 360 multiple rockets. Throughout the week, we established that increase in such volatility. This latent possibility for subsequent outbreaks of armed violence has many causes, notably the side's failure to disengage, or at the minimum maintain positions, and the failure to withdraw heavy weapons. Our monitoring officers have established the fact that strong suggest that units of the Ukrainian armed forces have moved forward in West Luhansk region in the vicinity of the village of Novo-Alexandrivka. Along with other OSCE SMM monitoring officers, I was yesterday in fact in the village where we saw Ukrainian armed forces soldiers. Our monitoring officers last week also observed 15 weapons in violation of agreed withdrawal lines, 9 in government-controlled areas and 6 in areas not controlled by the government. Of note, the SMM saw 10 multiple-launch rocket systems near non-government-controlled Krustalny on 5th February and 8 multiple-launch rocket systems in government-controlled Topoline on 8th February. There is an established correlation between violence and especially upsurges in violence and the failure to withdraw weapons and disengage. Dear friends, in addition to the presence of proscribed heavy weapons and the proximity of armed forces and formations, it is clear that violence continues because those who are committing it are allowed to do so. They are not held to account. Provisions to cease fire have been agreed. There is no ambiguity. Minsk, the agreement the sides have signed, stipulates in no uncertain language that there is to be no use of any weapons. Provisions to withdraw heavy weapons, to disengage and to demine have also been agreed. Similarly, the language and understanding was clear. There is no room for misunderstanding. Orders to people on the ground have presumably been given to ensure compliance with those commitments. I presume such orders were given. And yet, as anyone in eastern Ukraine knows for almost 4.5 years of bitter experience, or as anyone reading OSCE SMM daily report knows, there is at best only partial compliance. There is a disconnect between what has been agreed and what is actually done. In addition to almost 8,000 ceasefire violations throughout Donbass and the presence of heavy weapons, last week, the OSCE SMM also observed no progress on 2 other provisions agreed by the sides, namely disengagement and demining. An OSCE SMM unmanned aerial vehicle in government-controlled areas around Shirokine Vodiane spotted approximately 600 anti-tank mines on 7th February. Not far away on the same day, just east of Shirokine, close to so-called DPR controlled positions, the UAV observed about 20 anti-tank mines. Dear friends, compliance with the Minsk agreements is the responsibility of the sides. The sides must ensure what they have agreed to do is carried out. They must comply. They must bridge the gap between commitment and reality. Making Minsk a reality, making the ceasefire a reality, requires accountability. Without accountability, there is impunity, and with impunity, there is continued violation. This simple fact was evident for all to see last week. Even for those who question our reports, this fact, like all other facts we established, is indisputable. As well as the ceasefire violations, the heavy weapons in violation of the withdrawal lines, the stalled disengagement process, and mines and unexploded ordnance scattered all along the contact line, there was also an aggressive, violent posture adopted towards OSCE SMM monitors. Unarmed civilian monitoring officers, whose safety and security the sides have pledged to ensure, faced multiple threats as they worked directly on the contact line day and night. On 9th February, armed men from the so-called DPR fired shots in the vicinity of monitoring officers, what one of these men described as warning shots. Last week also saw 3 of our unmanned aerial vehicles targeted by small arms fire, twice in government-controlled areas and once in an area not controlled by the government. Deliberate attempts to prevent the mission from carrying out its mandated duty to monitor and verify the level of compliance with commitments to cease fire and withdraw weapons. These attempts to prevent the OSCE SMM from monitoring and verifying the sites' level of compliance come despite the sites having agreed to ensure effective monitoring. Has anyone been held accountable? Dear friends, commitments have been made. Those who signed on the dotted line did so, I believe, in good faith. If their word and the commitments they made, and indeed the Minsk agreements themselves, are to mean anything, promises must be kept. Promises to cease fire, to withdraw weapons, to disengage, to demine, and to ensure the safety and security of unarmed civilian monitoring officers can only be fulfilled if those breaking those promises are held to account. Those violating must be held to account. Violations must be publicly condemned, not those committed by the other side, but those committed by the sides themselves. The sense of impunity must be ended. Promises made must be kept, and the agreed ceasefire must be respected. People, and especially children, living in eastern Ukraine deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Now it's time for questions. Do your colleagues still have questions? Колеги, чи є запитання? If there is no questions and we have no questions, thank you, Mr. Hook, and let's finish.
Okay, thank you.